So here's my question. When someone says that, for example, in the US in April, unemployment is 4.2%, do you feel that that reflects your neighborhood, your city, your peers, or maybe even your own family? And here's why I'm asking that question. On paper, the US unemployment rate in April was a fairly impressive 4.2%. That's the kind of number that economists and investors like to hear. So it kind of sounds like things are pretty much under control. But here's the catch. 4.2% only tells you half of the story, or in fact, not even half. I want to look at the Ludwig Institute for Shared Economic Prosperity today, LISEP. And they've coined something better known as the true rate of unemployment, TRU, or true I'm going to call it in this video. And that's a broader, more inclusive gauge, and it covers underemployment and also underpaid work. And their April TRU number, 24.3%. That is nearly 6 times the BLS headline rate. That's the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And that's a story I'm going to look at today, because behind every one of those data points, there is a person. It could be you, could be a friend, could be a family. For many, the American dream is more about surviving these days, less about prospering as we know it in the traditional sense. So I want to summarize the key numbers in this report today. First off, the headline inflation, according to the Bureau in April 2025, 4.2%. Now, when you look at LISEP's true rate of unemployment, the TRU, that's 24.3%. When you look at the true out of population, so that's ages 16 plus, 52.4%. Over half of the adult population is functionally unemployed. Now, let's look at the definition of unemployed, because this makes a huge difference. The Bureau, they define employed as if during the survey reference week, they meet any of the following criteria: worked at least 1 hour as a paid employee, worked at least 1 hour in their own business, profession, trade, or farm, were temporarily absent from their job, business, or farm, whether or not they were paid for the time off, worked without pay for a minimum of 15 hours in a business or farm owned by a member of their family. LISEP modifies the Bureau's official definition with the following very important stipulations. It says an individual must either have a full-time job, 35 plus hours per week, or have a part-time job but no desire to be in full-time, for example, students in many cases. Also, the second stipulation is that an individual must earn at least $25,000 annually. You'll note the screen says $20,000, but that was changed to $25,000 as of January of last year. So they're saying that 24% of Americans are functionally unemployed, and I want to look at where they get that 24% number from. Actually, let's look first at who LISEP is. And this is a small nonprofit that was founded back in 2019 by Gene Ludwig. He's the former U.S. comptroller of the currency, and Dr. Carol Ludwig. And its stated mission is to produce original economic research and develop more transparent metrics, like the true rate of unemployment, TRU, that's what we're talking about here today. They also do the true living cost, TLC, and the minimum quality of life, the MQL indices. And they have the goal here of shedding some light on the economic challenges that are facing specifically low and middle income Americans. And the organization itself, it is a little bit controversial, mainly because of its small size, the fact that they rely heavily on the Bureau's statistics to actually form their bases. So people in support of LISEP, they will say that it's credible. They'll say that they have notable leadership, they have openness, they have updated data, and they have recognition in some high-profile media. They do face their fair share of criticism about possible oversimplification. Some of the concerns are they work as a valuable supplementary lens on economic well-being, especially for those low middle income Americans, but definitely should be viewed alongside other sources and methods for a balanced perspective. I have no problem with that at all. So when we look at what LISEP does zero in on, they look at workers who are unemployed, actively looking with no job, or underemployed. So they're working part-time, but they're seeking full-time hours, or possibly they're working at a poverty level wage, even though they are working full-time hours, but their pay is below the sustainable level. So this is an intentional shift from the Bureau's minimum bar of that 1 hour in 2 weeks definition that counts you as employed regardless of your income. Now, the true algorithm, it uses that BLS data, but it adjusts for that $25,000 per year poverty threshold and updates it with inflation. For those below that, unless they're earning more, they're deemed to be functionally unemployed. They also address those who are working under the table. And they say that they have a separate informal economy that shows the off-the-books work that added 2.8 million jobs into functional employment, but they're saying that that hardly moves the needle on their broader labor challenges that we're experiencing out there today. Now, finally here, TRU, true, is published on a monthly basis. It usually comes out about 2 weeks after the BLS releases its report. So when we break down these numbers, the TRU shows rather disturbing racial, gender, and educational disparities. When we look at the actual data, if we look at it by race, Black workers have a TRU of 26.7%, Hispanic workers 28.2%, white workers 23%. By gender, women 28.6%, men are 20%. When we look at it by education, no high school, 50.7% are functionally unemployed. High school diploma or some college, around 28%. With a bachelor's or higher, that's much lower, 16% with a bachelor's degree, 13.1% with an advanced degree. Now, I want to talk about the implications of all this information here. And if you believe that the official 4.2% rate is true, then you're probably going to assume that the labor market is still pretty strong, and you would support decisions like, delaying interest rate changes, perhaps reducing some labor market interventions. But when you look at the LISEP numbers, they warn that treating this sort of borderline or poorly paid workers as successful employment, that could lead to pretty poor policy design. That includes underinvestment in the workforce development, housing affordability, or childcare. These are areas that make it harder to close that affordability gap. Inflation, even if it's moderate, does hit hardest on those who are barely at survival or just above survival wages. The Federal Reserve officials, they say that they look through these low wages, but a lot of Americans don't have any cushioning at all if costs do in fact rise. Now the question is, does that 4.2% reflect the worker experience, or is that just the economic data that comes out? True asks, is the job enough to get by or barely enough to get through? And it's sort of a nudge toward rethinking the labor stats. Many probably in this case are going to argue that TRU overcounts temporary unemployment or that informal work will fill those gaps. But LISEP's data show that the informal economy adds negligible relief and that the underpaid workers remain under-resourced. To me, it's pretty obvious out there that a lot of Americans don't just lack jobs, but they lack sufficiency from the work that they are doing. So when we look ahead, if the policymakers, if the Bureau, if they start using some richer metrics like TRU does, then we could see some stronger wage support, potentially increasing minimum wages or tax credit. Another point, if inflation stays low or if wages do edge up, then that TRU could tick downward gradually. That said, if wage pressure does fade, if the gig economy holds strong, then millions may remain sort of trapped in this underemployment range, underpaid, and certainly uncertain. Does that make sense? Certainly uncertain? I think that it does. So here's my question again. When someone says 4.2% unemployment, do you feel that that reflects your neighborhood, the people that you know, or even your family? What does a job really mean in 2025? Let me know what you think below. Should these be the measures that matter more in policy, in business, or quite frankly, even in elections? Let me know what you think. As always, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.